and click on this. Press it on.
Respected seniors, teachers, faculty members, and delegates, greetings from IAP NeoCon 2021. I am Dr. Rajagopalan, Coordinator IAP NeoCon 2021. Let us start the 11th webinar of Learn from the Legends, International Bi-Monthly Webinar Series, an academic initiative of IAP NeoChap, organized by NNF Kerala and IAP Thrissur. We have nearly 3,000 registrations from 65 countries for this scientific feast. A warm welcome to all delegates in Zoom as well as YouTube on behalf of IOP NeoChap for today's program. We were lucky to have an eminent faculty, a legend in pediatrics and neonatology, Professor Dr. Lucky Jain from Emory University School of Medicine, Atlanta, to speak on COVID. We welcome you all to this webinar series, sir. It is an important day for us because UNICEF India is also joining today's scientific session. I would like to welcome Dr. Vivek Singh, resource person, UNICEF India, to the function. Two experts in neonatology of our country are moderators for today's session. Dr. Umesh Vaidya from Pune and Dr. Dinesh Chirla from Hyderabad. Hearty welcome to the webinar. Before the main session, I invite Dr. Vivek Singh to address the gathering.
Thank you, Dr. Rajgopal, and a warm welcome to all the attendees. I'm Vivek. As Dr. Rajgopal mentioned, I work with the UNICEF India Country Office Health Team. And I must mention that it was Dr. Manoj as a representative of NNF, where I and Dr. Manoj happened to be in one session, which was talking about psychosocial wellness of healthcare workers. And this session was organized by the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS. And in the panel, just to set the context, in the panel over associations that like the Indian Association of Psychiatry, Indian Association of Psychiatric Social Workers, the Integrative Yoga and Meditation Center at NIMHANS. Then Dr. Manoj was presenting a wellness solution of how NNF is engaging its member through exercises and other programs for the wellness. And at the end of the webinar, I think what the discourse was that unless we engage the medical fraternity, especially the healthcare workers in wellness programs, we'll have to go for therapeutic options, and which is a reality. And UNICEF has realized that now more than ever, healthcare workforce are an asset to the health system, which is not replenishable as quickly as you can do ventilators or oxygen supply or PPE. You need good 10 to 15 years to produce a good quality physician, or 5 to 10 years, a good quality nurse. So that said, we are very happy that we are able to contribute to this effort. And without taking much time, over to Dr. Dinesh, and we are looking forward to listening from Dr. Lucky, who we had heard during the NeoCon last year on a similar topic. And we know that across the country, how some of the fraternities still talks about the value of that lecture we had heard last year. Thank you very much. Happy to be part of this panel today.
Thank you, Dr. Vivek, and thank you, Dr. Manoj and IAP Untitled Chapter. And thank you, Dr. Lucky Jain, for accepting our invitation. And it was wonderful last year to have you. And I think so many people benefited from your lecture, and they still talk about your lecture in NeoCon 2019. And thousands are looking forward to listen to you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lucky Jain. It has been testing time for all of us from the last now nearly 8 months fighting COVID-19. And I know many of us has faced this problem in different capacities, some on personal level, some on institutional level, some on community levels. And I'm sure people would have questions a different way. It could be medical, it could be on a personal level about how do we cope with these situations. Dr. Lucky Jain is a professor and chairman of pediatrics at Emory University School of Medicine. He's the chief academic officer of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. He was also executive director of the Emory Children's Pediatric Institute and has been the president and CEO of the Emory Children's Center. He has been a senior investigator at the Center for Cell and Molecular Signaling and holds a joint appointment as professor in the Department of Physiology. He has been a graduate of SMS Medical College, Jaipur, before he shifted his base to US and has led a very successful career in there. He has been the director of the program of neonatology for 1994 to 2004, and from then on has been significantly contributing to neonatal research. And his field of research has been physiology of sodium and fluid transport in the lungs and the strategies to improve the lung fluid clearance. Dr. Jain is a member of several neonatal scientific organizations, including the American Thoracic Society, American Physiology Society, American Academy of Pediatrics, and many such societies. And he's got a long list of CV, which he actually concised and sent to me. I'm But most importantly, he has won the prestigious Ross Educator of the Year Award from the Southern Society of Pediatric Research and the most distinguished Physician of the Year Award from the Association of American Physicians of Indian origin. Dr. Jain is also 2000 recipient of the Pediatric Pioneer Award from the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We're very proud to have you, sir. In 2004, Dr. Jain also received an executive MBA from the Gazeta Business School at Emory University and was later appointed as a medical director and was also part of the board of directors of the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Clinical Care Network. He significantly contributed to the research. He has been editor-in-chief of North American Clinics in Pneumology, which we all still sort of enjoy reading, and serves on the editorial board of the BMC Pediatrics, the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Neonatology Review, and MRI Health. Dr. Jain became a keen advocate of personal and institutional wellness after suffering a heart attack in 2011. We heard his emotional journey last year. He has been a keen interest in Vipassana meditation and is a golfer and plays tennis. He has 2 children and is married to Shabnam Jain, a faculty member at MROD, and the one he considered is a singular pillar of the strength for over 30 years. So we all are looking forward to hear from you. I hand over the proceeding to Dr. Umesh Vaidya to introduce us to the topic today, and then we all look forward to listen from Dr. Lucky Jain. Dr. Umesh, please.
Hi, I think first of all, thanks to IP Neonatology Chapter, IP Thrissur branch, the UNICEF, Dr. Manoj and all office bearers of the IP Neonatology Chapter. This particular webinar series that has been conducted over the last few months has been really remarkable. And it shows one of these adaptations that all of us have done in this pandemic, where we continue to pursue our learning using these webinars and having very great experts from across the world. So we have had many scientific webinars and we've learned a lot in the last few months. But today's topic is really very special. And it is from a very, very special person, Dr. Lucky Jain. I first met Dr. Lucky Jain around 30 years ago in 1991. He was a very young and very handsome person scholar in Chicago with Dr. Vidyasagar. And I met him again in 2020 with some very brief visits in between. The Hyderabad talk was a real eye-opener, and it's a phenomenal talk, which was really an eye-opener for many of us. So all of us have lived very similar lives. We spend a lot of time in higher education, and then we pursue our profession, and then we get our success, and the success brings upon additional stresses. And we just keep on, we are just swept away by the tide. Mondays to Saturdays, months pass by, years pass by. And many times you don't realize the direction in which we are moving. And it's always said that success comes with a very high price. There's a saying in English saying that you always learn to live life, but it takes a lifetime to learn it. So by the time you learn how to live life well, life is virtually coming to an end. But there are people like Dr. Lucky Jain who actually give us a reminder, and they actually tell us to think, to stop, to ponder, and to think which way we are moving, and to restructure our lives in a very meaningful way. The topic today is regarding COVID-19. And as Dr. Dinesh rightly put it, COVID-19 has been a big shock for the whole world. Rarely have there been such issues globally which has affected every human being and so many countries and of such a serious nature. Not only we have been affected professionally, but I also, my personal loss, my family has lost. I lost my brother last month because of COVID, and our family is still trying to cope up with this enormous loss that we had, which happened in a very, very short and unexpected manner. So how do we really adjust to this? When is this going to end? When is our life going to be normal? What should we do to cope up with this pandemic? And I think there is no better person than Dr. Lucky Jain, who will tell us today how to go about and when this story will come to an end. So I welcome Dr. Lucky Jain, and we look forward to his presentation. Over to Dr. Jain.
Just sir, before you start, just a reminder to everyone, if you have any question answer, please put in the Q&A box and not the chat box. Over to you, sir.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Cherla and Dr. Vaidya. What an amazing honor it is for me, and I'm so humbled by this opportunity to speak with you all again. I just this morning, Dinesh and Umesh, I was reading a summary of a book that I read a few years ago, but I wanted to read it again because right after this, I have to inaugurate a session at our own hospital where we're installing a large segment of our new hospital. And I decided that I was going to start with a little quotation from this book called The Road to Character. It's a book by a journalist named David Brooks. And I'll read to you from the books. When he talks about the strength of character and the moral compass, he refers to two types of virtues. One that go on people's resumes, and the others that are read or spoken about when the person dies. We call them eulogy virtues. The moral concerns, code of ethics, when they're viewed through the lens of philosophy, that is what defines great people. That is what defines Mahatma Gandhi's. And so I submit to you that added with a little tincture of humility creates this amazing composition of resilience that I hope I'll cover in my talk as well. So let me start by thanking each and every one of you who are on this webinar from the core of my heart as we begin talking about this very important topic today. So I want to start just by acknowledging the long relationship I've had with Dr. Ashok Tiwari, the president of NNF, Dr. Cherla, Dr. Vaidya, Dr. Manoj, who actually brought the opportunity to me and started speaking with me, and Dr. Rajagopal as well. So lots of people. I also want to thank Dr. Vivek Singh, who I met in Hyderabad and was so impressed by the work that UNICEF is doing in India. Just a word about who we are in Atlanta. I know Dinesh was very kind in his introduction and mentioned much more than what I deserve, but we are a partnership between one of the leading universities, research universities in America called Emory University in Atlanta, and the largest pediatric healthcare systems in America, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I took over as chair of pediatrics in 2015 when we had about 360 pediatric subspecialists. This is not counting general pediatricians. This is only people who do endocrinology, neurology, GI in pediatrics. We now have over 550 faculty members just in my department who take care of sick children from all over the country. And this shows our growth to national preeminence in that in the year 2004, we were ranked number 50th in the country. And this year, our extramural funding will exceed $100 million, which will put us at the #1 rank when the year ends. We are tracking about $20 million ahead of the second largest program in the United States. So I'm really proud of the progress we have made. We also just recently announced the launch of a new hospital in Atlanta, a new children's hospital. This hospital will have about 450 beds in first phase with a capacity to go to 1,000 beds. It's located on a plot of land which is 75 acres. And just last week, we managed to get a $200 million donation from the founder of Home Depot. And that has suddenly put everything on great amount of energy. So I know you're eager to hear about wellness in the context of COVID-19. And so let's start with that. I think that every year I have experienced that there is a new challenge that confronts the medical community. These are the trials and tribulations of a career in medicine. But this challenge of COVID-19 has been like none other in the 40 years that I have been in medicine. This is one of the earliest reports that appeared in published literature when an article published in AJP reported 382 physician deaths worldwide within a couple of months or a month after COVID-19 hit us. At that time, we had only 12 physician deaths in the United States. But then I tracked and saw that there were 104 physician deaths due to COVID-19 in India by that time. The deaths are only the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg represents the suffering, both for the family, as Umesh mentioned when he lost his brother. I mean, I simply cannot imagine, as a physician, a brother going through the torture of seeing a loved one die without the family being all around the person. By May 13, 2020, there were over 1,000 deaths amongst physicians that had been reported. Most of these people were in primary care. Outpatient physicians faced a greater threat than those working in the hospitals. And that is primarily because in the outpatient setting, there is a lot more exposure and less protective equipment, and the environment is not as secure. In the hospitals, we became very careful in screening visitors, not letting any visitor into the hospital or the ICU. And so just as I think about, imagine if 1,000 policemen had died in taking care of a riot, or 1,000 firefighters had died in taking care of a large wildfire in a jungle, what chaos it would bring. And for us to have lost hundreds, thousands of people worldwide to this pandemic, it makes me numb. It also brings to home our own personal injuries. As Dinesh mentioned to you, I'm no expert in this area of wellness. I have just learned from my own mistakes and my own health issues. As he mentioned, in 2011, I was at a medical conference in Florida when I suffered a cardiac arrest. And it was a time when I was at the peak of my career. I was as healthy as one can be. I weighed the same amount as I did when I was in medical school. I had no chronic illness. And it was a big struggle because I had to go through prolonged CPR. I spent days in the ICU. They could not maintain my blood pressure. And so as a neonatologist, I saw drips hanging at my bedside that I often use in my own ICU, dopamine, epinephrine. And they finally had to put in an intra-aortic balloon pump to assist my circulation. So it was a time when I had begun thinking about death. And I began writing about death. And I worried about post-CPR issues. I realized, though, that I was surrounded by amazing people. My family, our 2 daughters, my wife. But I also realized that that was the time to change, that if God had given me, or whoever had given me the opportunity to come back out of that near death door, that if I did not change this time, I would never forgive myself, and my family and friends would never forgive me either. And so there was an intense desire to look inwards. And I realized there was room to grow in all dimensions: spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, all dimensions. And I began asking myself, what I do in my job, is it joyful? Do I have the right skill set? And what I do, is it meaningful? What is it that, of all the things that I do, that are not meaningful? And if they are not meaningful, why can't I eliminate them to create a greater balance in my life? So I'm going to talk to you about each of these elements with the hope that you, as you listen to this, can answer these questions alongside me. So the first question to you is, what you do today, is it joyful? Because if it is not joyful, I can promise you at some point you will burn out. And I can promise you at some point that burnout will become so intense that it will create problems. So when I ask this question, is it joyful? I run into people who say, yes, it is very joyful, but I am exhausted. I'm constantly tired. I'm physically run down. You look at their actions and you see they're so easily annoyed. They get irritated towards coworkers. They are cynical and negative towards their hospital or to their work environment. They constantly have a sense of being overwhelmed, have difficulty sleeping, experience difficulty in just simple logical thinking because they're always multitasking and they're unable to relax and concentrate. Now, all of this is from the MASLAC burnout inventory, which has been tried now and tested for over 20 years. It consistently shows people who are at the risk of having sympathetic overdrive and having vulnerability to chronic diseases as well as acute diseases like COVID-19. And I must submit to you that if you think that any one of us or any country is immune, I used to think that when I was in India, practicing in India, that the Indian culture and the Vedic teachings allowed us to be more resistant because we embraced this profession as if it was a calling. Yet, I realized that as medicine became more and more commercialized, that calling is still there, but the immunity from burnout is gone. And here's the proof. We have the highest rate of depression of any profession worldwide. 1 in 5 will experience significant alcohol use or some other drugs. 46% experience burnout. A large number commit suicide each year. And look at the rate of suicide amongst women physicians compared to women in other professions. And there is a lot of bias against women in other professions. If you think that women in medicine don't get treated right, think about women in legal profession, judiciary, police, military, or many other professions where women are considered to be inferior to men. And so that stress is added on to the stress of everything else that you see. All of this leads to depersonalization, to loss of meaning, and to utter emotional exhaustion. And that manifests at some days you come back home and you say, oh my God, how can I go through another day like this? How can I continue to see suffering like this? And I think that is where I bring in the value of bringing balance in our lives, and the value of embracing the fact that there are three marriages that we have to deal with. There is the traditional marriage to our spouse, to our children, parents, siblings, extended family. That is all a part of one marriage. And then we have the marriage to our work, where we deal with all related issues. But the marriage that we completely forget about is the marriage to our own selves. We forget that there is a need for our own health to be absolutely at the top. Because if I am not strong, how can I take care of others? And that involves being spiritually, emotionally, and mentally strong, not just physically strong. And there is also this realization when you are at the deathbed. And it happened to me in 2011 when I started telling my wife, what is in my retirement account, where are the bank accounts, and trying to create a list of our assets. I realized that we had way more than what we would ever need. But we hadn't stopped to think where we need to draw the line. And now I realize that money simply cannot buy happiness. It's just a mirage. And we all understand it. We all know it. Yet it is this toxic combination of the desire to be better, the desire to have the ego control our actions that continues to come in the way. Not that we want it to be that way, but that's what it is. And we have to be able to confront it individually, some more than others. I must admit that I'm not trying to preach here because I am not a sadhu. I am like you. I am completely still submerged in day-to-day materialistic life. But I have begun to understand that if we want to prevent burnout, we have to detach it from our quest to earn money and fame. And that requires being honest with ourselves and addressing the issue of whether or not our job is the right size job. Now, I told you that we have in the past 5 years, into an academic environment, we have over 2,000 physicians who work in our hospital who are not in my department or on the teaching faculty. But within teaching faculty, of the 200 or so people we have recruited, I sit down with every single one of them and ask them, what is it that will give them joy and prevent burnout? And if I'm talking to a mother of 2 young children, I am willing to say, look, everything comes at a cost. But if you need to spend 2 half days with your family, taking care of your children, going to the school, meeting with the principals, getting your hair done, by all means, just cut back a little bit, create a little room for yourself, so that you're not consumed by the demands of the profession. So now let's move to the second question. Do you and do I have the right skill set? No other country in the world has embraced this issue in ancient literature as India has. And in ancient Indian literature, there is this story about a woodcutter who was amazingly good at cutting wood and would cut the best wood possible. And then one day, he comes to his guru in the jungle and says, I don't know what is wrong with me. I have been cutting wood for 20 years. And I am working harder than ever now, but I can't cut wood properly. And worst of all, I have lost joy in my work. And the guru looks at him and says, Beta, when was the last time you sharpened your axe? If your kulhari is blunt, you cannot cut wood properly. And I think that for a lot of us, over time, we let our skill set become blunt, and then we start losing joy in the work we do. And so particularly to the young people, I mentioned this because you have the opportunity to reset every few years, every 5 years, every 10 years, make an assessment of how to create that joy back into what you do, because that is what will ultimately determine your longevity in the profession. Now, that also requires being better at the jobs that are assigned to us, being constantly in an effort to improve, becoming business savvy, becoming efficient. I still know of people who, when it comes to electronic media and electronic things, they are not very savvy. And they say, oh, you know what, I'm too old to do this. Well, actually, spending one day or one Saturday or Sunday to learn that can create a lot of efficiency for the rest of our lives. So why not? Why not do that? Many of us never learned to type. I learned shorthand when I was in India because I thought that it would help me take notes. And I just think that there is so much value in constantly learning, advancing our skill set. And Dr. Cherla mentioned about my MBA. It was at a point when I felt that I needed to learn to manage finances properly because my lab had grown to 10 or 11 people. We had millions of dollars in grants. And I joined the business school mainly to learn about finance and accounting. And I came back and realized that so much of what we did in our environment was wrong. And that our CEOs and CFOs were pushing us around thinking that doctors don't know anything about it. And then many years later, when our 2 children had gone to college, both my wife and I decided we wanted to go to a school of public health. And Emory has an amazing school of public health, and we both joined an MPH program. And so there's never the loss or lack of opportunities to continue to grow our skill set. And I can tell you that when this pandemic hit us, what I had learned in the School of Public Health and business school helped me become a better administrator. Within days after this happened, we put a COVID force in pediatrics in my department. It was a group of about 20 people who had expertise in different areas of pandemic control and virology. We generated the first antigen that came out of the COVID-19 virus and converted that into a serology test. And we created a new platform to do point of care testing for COVID-19 at the bedside. That led to the NIH making our pediatrics department in Atlanta the national testing site for all COVID-19 test validation. So we have so far received $50 million to do that work. If you look up if you just Google RADX, you'll see the role that our university and my department is playing in that. Every week we get a new test to be validated. They are coming from both industry and from academic environment. And what we do is we take known quantities of virus, we spike the specimens, and then we are constantly looking at sensitivity, specificity, and predictive values of these tests. So I think that is what I call becoming business savvy and efficient, because it requires us immediately tuning into the need of the hour. And then the third question is something that I don't think this audience needs to ask, what you do, is it meaningful? I've seen many of you working in your environments with meager resources, and still the commitment that you all have to your profession in India and worldwide is unbelievable. It's much easier for me and my colleagues in America or Europe to say this, but I can tell you my most challenging times were working in remote areas in my state where there were not enough ventilators available or enough resources available. So what you do is indeed extraordinarily meaningful, and you should never, never lose sight of that. So my wellness journey needs to start with me. And your wellness journey, I submit to you, needs to start with you. And if you remember nothing else, I beg you to think about these 3 connections to personal wellness. Are we physically energized? Are we emotionally connected? And are we purposefully aligned? These are 3 ingredients that again came from very ancient yoga books. And you see how the Western world has begun to latch onto these in a very important way. Physically energized means to restore the balance that we constantly lose. And I'll talk to you about the balance in a second. It's also, in medical terms, is maintaining the internal homeostasis. That internal homeostasis requires us constantly dampening down the sympathetic overdrive. Most of us operate in a system or in a way that requires us running from one post to another post. In America, we say, I'm burning my candle at both ends. And that's why the sympathetic nervous system is constantly in overdrive. The catecholamines and cortisol start to burn our internal system. What the yogis explain to us is that we need to strengthen our parasympathetic nervous system. And we need to do that by focusing on breathing, deep breathing, by constantly telling our mind that it is not necessary to have constant chatter. And having, so the signs of having a strong parasympathetic nervous system, I urge you all to do this test on your own self, particularly if you're not on beta blockers, is to test your pulse in the middle of the day several times and see where you are. For our yogis, they can be in a storm and their heart rate is 50 or 60 because their parasympathetic nervous system protects them from these ongoing ups and downs. Becoming emotionally connected is equally important because that determines our strength and resilience when we have crises like COVID-19. Particularly if a family member gets impacted or a VIP comes to your hospital and there are all types of things that are being thrown at you. It is during these times of crisis when you don't have proper PPE available or you don't have the drugs that you need, that becoming emotionally connected to our inner core becomes important. Now, the easy emotions are fear, worry, frustration, uncertainty, and grief. The balancing emotion is love and joy. And I think that is what I continue to mention to my own self and to everyone I interact with, that after I came back from my heart attack and I went back into the ICU, even though I never was trying to do it, when I would start examining a patient or start doing my round, the first thing I would do is hold my patient's hand in my hand. I would close my eyes and say, just for today, let me help heal you. Give me all your pain and suffering. Or give me shafa, give me the strength in my hands so that I can become a part of your wellness journey, my little patient. And that is what I consider getting emotionally connected to our profession and to our patients. And years later, I remember one mother wrote a long letter to me, and she said, I don't know, Dr. Jain, what your religious belief is, but I was struck by the fact that every day when you came to do rounds in the ICU, and you began examining my little baby, you closed your eyes and you prayed. Well, I don't think I was praying. I was just asking for my own strength to be invoked so that I could help my patient. And that, again, brings in purposeful alignment, because that is where unlimited energy lives, deep inside. Deep inside is where all of the energy is. And we keep letting coats and coats of external fat and lard stifle it. And so when we become connected to our inner purpose is when we become truly energized, inspired, and powerful. And particularly in times like this, when there is one crisis after the other. And by the way, COVID-19 is not going away in a hurry. We need to fasten our seatbelts, and it could be 6 months, it could be 9 months, it could be a year before it lets down in its intensity. Because we're the national site for Moderna vaccine in the United States, and I know every detail of how the vaccine is proceeding. It'll be the earliest the FDA will look at the data to approve the vaccine will be sometime in December. And then you can think about the challenges of mass distribution of the vaccine. It will take at least 3 months to set that up and start manufacturing, distributing the vaccine. That is assuming that the vaccine is effective. You know that there are problems with the AstraZeneca vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine has gone through some trouble. So we really need to make sure that we don't run out of energy and steam as we are dealing with this crisis, because it requires us to be resilient and strong. And resilient and strong means that we don't break. We bend when we need to bend, but we come right back up when that fierce wind goes away. I heard just a couple of weeks ago of one of my favorite surgeons in Jaipur who passed away from COVID-19. And I was thinking that is not that the person wasn't strong and resilient. It is that this disease is relentless, and that we have to be prepared both physically and emotionally to be able to handle that. And that requires us going back to our core training, because most of us have been trained to perform surgery or to perform procedures or manage babies on ventilators or children on ventilators, but we have not been taught to live life like a true healer, like a true physician. We just do this mechanically. And that is a problem, because when problems happen, like with COVID-19, problems have happened throughout, where just one mistake happened and somebody near and dear to us got infected. We keep that hurt in our minds for the rest of our lives. This is what happened in the Beijing Olympics when this Olympic team in the United States dropped a baton, and the senior athlete on that team, Tyson Gray, said, "I'm a veteran. I've never dropped a baton in my life. I felt it was right there in my thumb area. I went to grab it, nothing. I should have made sure. I guess it was my fault." 1 year later, Tyson Gray said that for the entire year, he wakes up in the middle of the night with sweats and a nightmare that he dropped his own baby, his own child, on the floor. That's the impact of becoming second victims. And in our profession, This is a very common thing that we don't address. The consequences of second victim syndrome are variable. And you see in this slide, the nurse on the right was a nurse in Seattle who gave a wrong dose of calcium to a patient on ECMO. And 2 weeks later, they found her body in her apartment. And she had killed herself. And so it is important to remember that we as healers need to heal ourselves first. We must take charge and make sure that it is not just us, it is our entire environment that embraces the philosophy of being well and being healthy, because being healthy and happy requires us honoring the fact that happiness does not reside in life circumstances. When I ask people, what do you think, where do you think happiness resides? A lot of people immediately jump to say, oh, it's the life circumstances. Look at the pathetic condition in my hospital, or look at what COVID-19 has done to us, or look at what the government is doing or not doing, or look at what happened to Mr. I forget his name, Mr. Rajput, the actor who committed suicide. The mind carries on these conversations, but we all focus on life circumstances and intentional activities. Whereas when you look at it, half of our wellness is entirely in our control. Now, I used to think, how do sanskaras get connected to our happiness in our future life? And now I realize that it is in our genetic code. And that yes, there are epigenetic changes that have happened in our previous life, in our mother's womb. But half of what we are, whether we are happy people or unhappy people, is internal to us. And that life circumstances contribute a very tiny 10% to our happiness. I think this is a key factor that we need to understand and make sure that everyone around us understands as well. And finally, I submit to you that people who give are always happy. This is a quotation from Dalai Lama when he visited Emory. He said, people who give are always happy. Those who take are never satisfied. And so we ask ourselves, are we kind to each other? Do we promote a fair and just culture where we don't cut each other's throats? We continue to foster an environment where we help each other. And do we practice random acts of kindness? And so I'll end here by saying that I've tried to pack a lot of information in this 45 minutes. I indicated to Dr. Dinesh Cherla and Dr. Umesh Vaidya that these slides can be and should be made available to all of you in India, abroad, wherever, so that you can use this material to teach in your own environment. Begin a conversation, start having journal clubs about wellness, start talking about what we can do to help each other maintain a culture of wellness, because we have to be in this for the long haul. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you. Take care, my friends. I'm happy to take questions. Dr. Cherla, Dr. Vaidya?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Again, I think one of the most wonderful talks, and every time we hear you, we, I think, realize what wrong we are doing in our lives and what we need to correct. So I think it's equally inspiring every time we hear you. We have, I think, one question that has come up. I just checked that. The question is that it's from Dr. Prashant Gowda, and he says, what is your take on quantifying happiness? Like we have happiness index, for example. So again, it's like a score, like a down score or a Silverman score. So how do you really scale it? Is there a way to know how happy you are? Is there a meter? Or
that is a very difficult question to answer. In fact, if you go to some of the most amazing yogis and rishis who have attained happiness and ask them, how do I know if I'm happy or not? There are some biologic indicators that you can use, but those are indicators of lack of happiness or stress. So you can measure cortisol levels, you can measure CR reactive protein, you can measure catecholamines, you can do a lot, but there is no happiness factor that has ever been designed that you can actually measure. What I submit to you is that the best judge of whether or not you are happy is you yourself. You have to keep looking deep inside your own self and be vigilant and ask people around you. I can tell you that we have 10,000 people in my hospital, that if there was ever a poll where they said, can you vote for who you think is the happiest person in the hospital, I can confidently tell you that I will get the highest number of votes from my own hospital. But that's because I feel it. I feel that when I connect with people, I feel it is my duty to pass on my happiness. Every morning, I meditate for an hour. And after I get up from my meditation, I fold my hands and I say that to every individual that I see today, I promise you, I will share with you my peace and happiness. So yeah, that should be the spirit which will determine whether or not you are happy.
Right. Wonderful talk, Dr. Lucky Jain. Very inspiring, like every time. And the another question by Dr. Kusum Kala was how to start healing a healer.
Yes, Dr. Kusum, I think that healing the healer requires doing those three things that I mentioned: becoming physically energized, becoming emotionally connected, and becoming purposefully aligned to our inner core and to what we do outside. I think that these three things are essential elements in healing the healer. Now, you'll see the times when you become emotionally disconnected is when you start losing passion, energy. So physically, you may still be energized because you can be on the treadmill, you can still be going to the gym or doing your morning, evening walks. That is not becoming emotionally connected and emotionally energized. That requires staying connected with the purpose. So yes, please, there are, of course, this is not meant to be an all-inclusive sort of prescription. I'm only presenting to you a tiny, tiny facet of what I consider to be essential elements. But if I had a day to spend with you, I would tell you about Vipassana, which I now do. I've been doing it for 10 years now. Every day, I learn something new about myself. I sit down, my knees hurting, I close my eyes. 1 hour later, I get up. And the only thing I remember is that I was noticing the knee hurting and my attention was focused on that knee or my breath, and the mind has completely calmed down. So that is part of that healing the healer journey.
So we have one question that says that it's Dr. Devang Shah, that we are guilty of quantifying our happiness by some other person's yardstick. So how to avoid this?
Yes, that is a very important question, Dr. Shah, that we are all guilty of assessing our own happiness by allowing other people to tell us, today, Umesh, you look very happy, or Dinesh, you look like you are the happiest person in the world. But the real barometer has to be deep inside. I think what happens is that there is an ego filter that sits around us. So when Dinesh was giving my introduction, my ego is thinking, oh my goodness, Dinesh has been so kind to me. I have, and then I'm realizing that back in 2011, all of that was going to be over in 1 second, gone completely. And then today, you could have been saying that this lectureship is in the honor of Dr. Lucky Jain, who passed away in 2011. And he was a big advocate of physician wellness. But that is where our mind is. Our mind is constantly seeking that input from others, which validates what we think is happening to our own selves. Aaj aap bahut achhe lag rahe ho. Our mind is wanting to hear that I'm looking very good today. And so that is the trap that we need to avoid. And we need to begin asking ourselves first, am I looking good externally and internally? And that is what I mentioned very early on, is mentioned in the Road to Character.
Yeah, that is one very interesting question from one of the attendees. And she has asked that how to be happy with the people around you. They tend to annoy you, and especially when you have to coexist with them, there is no choice. So is there any way that, which I think everyone faces that to some extent, that there may be some people and, you may not be getting along with them, you still can't avoid them, and they contribute a lot to your stress and unhappiness. So is there any tips for that?
Yes. So I'll give you one little example that I remember when I came to the US in 1985. I went to a little leaguers game. Baseball is very popular in the US. It's like cricket. And I went to a game in our neighborhood where children less than 10 years of age were playing baseball. And I noticed that these little kids, less than 10 years of age, they would come to the base, hitting base, and they were constantly spitting. They would spit, and then they would hold their bat and try to hit. Years later, I realized and noticed that in the major league professional baseball players, they all used to chew tobacco. And so on the TV, all of these young kids were seeing their role models spitting. And so they learned that. It is true that in our environment, there are a lot of people who are facing burnout, who are unhappy, who constantly portray negative energy. I think that rather than running away from them, it is important to embrace them, to create an opportunity for them to notice that their negative energy, more than hurting you or others in the environment, is hurting them. And that by helping them, you'll help the entire team.
Dr. Lucky Jain, in this scenario, I think a lot of people face some personal tragedy and some people have faced disruption. So then an interesting question is, how do you control emotions when you face this personal disruption or any death or any losses? How do you cope with that? How do you sort of deal with it?
Right. Yeah. No, that's another really important issue that we in medicine, when you're in a police job or you're a military general, you're not supposed to cry. Nobody expects you to break down. Yet some of the most powerful leaders openly express their emotion. And so I'm a strong advocate of being able to express emotion and letting the emotion connect you with what has happened. And so I everyone knows in my department that I cry very easily. And I'm the first one to say that I am emotionally, in a way, connected, but also challenged that I cannot handle my emotions that well. But that is my strength. And so please make sure that you take time to allow fear, grief, anxiety, and hurt, the loss of a loved one, all of those things to get synthesized. And once you are able to adjust to it, bring in room for positive emotions. Start thinking about, Umesh, start thinking about the amazing things your brother did and the good times you had with your brother in your younger days when you played together out in the street, you played cricket, and how that one time you hit a sixer on one of the balls he throwed and he was so mad at you. You know, those are the memories that then should drive that. Because remember that pain in life is inevitable. Pain in life is inevitable. Suffering is optional. The same parent died, 4 siblings. One goes into depression. The second one doesn't talk to anyone for 3 months because he's angry or she's angry. The third one celebrates the life of that lost parent and says what a blessing it was to have a parent like that and to have spent 70 years with that parent. And so I feel that a lot of us spend too much time suffering from what should be an adjustment to the loss, but then moving to the positive phase after that grief and anger is over. Because remember that love is the dominant emotion that counteracts the negative emotions of fear and vulnerability.
Wonderful. I think it's really, really well said. I think we have one question here that you suggested happiness depends only 10% on the life circumstances. But what in circumstances like death, bankruptcy, accidents? So there are so many other overwhelming problems. So here, don't you think that the life circumstances would overwhelm the other genetic and the other factors?
Yeah. So you're all scientists. That's a really good question, but you're all scientists. I can tell you that some of the most unhappy people in the world are people who have never had bankruptcies, have never had debts, don't have to deal with bringing food to the family table every day or worrying about children going to bed hungry. You know, so happiness is not connected to these external environments. You know, some of the happiest times were for me when I didn't have to worry about a large department, a large hospital. And so please make sure that you don't connect too much of your personal happiness to things in the environment that we cannot control. Tufan aate hain, you know, there are times when things happen that we cannot control. COVID-19 is a great example that has robbed us from our happiness. Yet I can tell you that these past 6 months have been the most rewarding 6 months of my life. Every morning, I am up at 5 o'clock, ready to take on new challenges. I read early in the morning, I meditate. By the time I'm at work, I've already come up with a plan of what we're going to do. Within 7 days after COVID-19 hit us, we had created in our own department a prototype of a face shield. And we did 3D printing and we started manufacturing it. And by May, we had manufactured 1.5 million face shields right here in Atlanta in our partnership with our engineering school over here at Georgia Tech. So I think there is a lot that we can do without having to get bogged down by external environment. It's the external environment. Again, I'll read to you from David Brooks. David Brooks says that challenges and hardships offer an opportunity to grow and become happy.
Dr. Lucky Jain, in your lecture, you did mention that a lot of us are trained to become like a good surgeon or a good neonatologist, so practice neonatology, but not say how to lead a life as a neonatologist. Similarly, there's one question which is saying, do you think meditation should be taught to all the junior doctors? And then added these things, has Dr. Lucky Jain written has written a book on how to lead a life?
I still haven't finished the book about death. I thought when I started writing that book about death that I didn't know at that time if I would have enough time to complete it. So I began writing it in big chapters about how, as a physician, I had seen death in my environment and how I was myself experiencing that close encounter with death. And so, yes, we need to teach our junior people, starting with medical schools. In fact, each one of you, when you put your children to bed today, begin a conversation about wellness, about happiness, about negative emotions, and about love. Teach them that love for the person you hate the most is what ultimately brings the true happiness or restores happiness, because the negative emotions are what takes away or what take away the happiness. So yes, thank you for this suggestion. At some point, I do want to write a book about my experiences in meditation, in Vipassana. Lord Buddha says that it is all experiential, that you can read all about it. You can continue to read about it. In fact, when Buddha was at his own deathbed, one person came to him to say, my Lord, I've been coming to your lectures for 10 years now, and I don't feel that I'm any closer to moksha or to my enlightenment. What am I doing wrong? And so Buddha asked him to tell him what is the way to get to his village from there. And the person started describing, you go out from here, then you make a right turn, then you see a big peepal tree. From there, you make another right turn, and then you get to a well. And then just by the end of that conversation, the man came to the realization that what Buddha was saying is, you can give directions to people to get to the village, but the only way to really do it is to experience it, and it has to be experiential. And so that's where I think we need to focus our attention.
Right. I think there's one question that has come that everybody has a very busy duty schedule, and one doctor wants to know that how in my busy schedule can I maintain this spiritual wellness and physical wellness, and I find it extremely difficult to do that. So what I think you covered part of it in the talk, but would you give her any specific suggestion?
So Umesh, everyone has to have their own recipe. I can share with you what I do. I feel I have a very busy schedule. I like I said, I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I generally go to bed at 11 in the night, 11:30. But for 8 years now, we have no TV at our home in America. I don't watch TV. And I make sure that I go to my physical trainer twice a week. Sunday mornings, I play tennis. Every night at 9:30, I go on a walk with my neighbor, but it's a meditative walk. And so there is, my average working day is 12 hours. Because between generally 10 and 11, I'm doing my final emails of the day. So I come back home, have supper, sit down, finish some work, and then go for my walk, and then come back and wrap up all of the work for the day. But there is, every day, I have booked some time for my physical and emotional wellness. And that 1 hour of meditation every day generally buys me 2 hours of sleep. So I can cut down 2 hours of sleep, and I wake up refreshed. Actually, I don't feel like I need more than 5 hours of sleep. My wife continues to say that I need more than that. But in ancient yogis say that char yogi, chhe bhogi, a art rogi. That means if you look at sleep, 4 hours is enough for yogis, 6 hours is enough for bhogis, like us, you and me. 8 hours of sleep is for rogis, meaning people who are not well.
Right.
So I think that the mind, the more, and we don't find a way to calm the mind down before we go to bed. So because I don't watch TV, and the last hours of the evening are spent either meditative walking or just wrapping up the work and planning for the next day, my mind is calm. I'm not thinking about any of these things. I sleep like a little child and wake up in the morning totally refreshed and ready. So there are days when I feel such an urge to sit up and meditate that I sit up in my bed. I don't even go to the cushion that I have put up for my meditation. I just sit in my bed, hold my legs and sit in half lotus posture and start just watching my breath. And the way the meditative breathing works is you watch the breath going in and out and just see where it is touching the philtrum. But that's just one technique. You can use a variety of techniques that are available in ancient India. But please don't say that you don't have time for your own emotional and physical wellness. Everyone does.
Right. So, how much time? Sorry.
There was one interesting question, Umesh Sarup. I thought, there's a nice slide where you showed about sympathetic, parasympathetic. So Sanjeev Upadhyay wants to know, how do you actually activate? You partly answered that, but probably if you put it in terms of how do you activate your parasympathetic nervous system?
So pranayam, if you read about pranayam and yoga, you'll see how coordination of breathing, stretching, and the mind are what activates sympathetic nervous system. The simplest way, there are many other ways of doing it, but the simplest way is taking any of the many breathing attributes. So I'll give you one other book assignment to read. The book is called Breath, B-R-E-A-T-H. Breath. It's a book by James Nestor, American author. I'll see if I can type it up in the chat box, or maybe you can. Is there a way for people to see it here?
Yeah, they can see the chat box.
Yeah, so that book talks about how to manage the parasympathetic nervous system, and it's amazing how all of us are physicians, and we are supposed to be people who should be teaching our patients how to manage this, and we ourselves have never been educated about this. Isn't so odd, Dinesh, that we are never taught in medical school these simple things. I recommend everyone to read this book called Breath by James Nestor. You can get it as an audio file, and it's an amazing book about how we as a society have become victims of mouth breathing, and how so many of us have sleep apnea and are not able to sleep properly, and that is because of the fact that we have not learned to breathe properly. Dinesh, I need to run. I could do this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lucky Jain, for your enlightening all of us. I know you have a very busy schedule, and there are so many good comments from all over the world about this lecture. I hand over the proceedings with I think, unless Dr. Umesh wants to say anything, to Dr. Manoj to have the closing remarks.
Yeah, I think thank you very much, Dr. Jain, and we are getting so much of appreciation on the chats. I think it has been an eye-opener, and I'm sure it will benefit a lot of professionals across the world. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Over to Dr. Manoj.
Thank you, sir.
Well, this was a true healing touch in these traumatic times. Thank you so much, Professor, for sparing your time for us. Now, may I now request Dr. Mukesh, one of the coordinators of Learn from the Legend series, to propose official vote of thanks. Thank you.
Dr. Mukesh is on mute.
Please unmute yourself, Mukesh.
My proud privilege to propose vote of thanks for this wonderful international webinar. First, let me place on records our sincere gratitude to Professor Dr. Lucky Jain from Emory University, Atlanta, for his very informative and wonderful talk on COVID-19 and the wellness. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Let me express our heartfelt thanks to moderators of this webinar, Dr. Umesh Vaidya from Pune and Dr. Dinesh Chirla from Hyderabad. Thank you, sirs. Most importantly, our sincere thanks to all the participants from all over the world who made this function a grand success. Lastly, but not the least, our faithful thanks to UNICEF India for partnership in this program. Once again, and thank you everyone from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you. Good night. And our next webinar series is on November 4th at 7:30 Indian Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. It's on extubation failure in extremely preterm infants by Professor Santana, McGill University, Montreal, Canada. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Take care, be safe, and hopefully we'll see you all soon at some point in person. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Stay happy, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.